Alrighty, we're back for the next episode of Trimet Board Meeting with Neal Berlin. And we're going to pick up where we left off. Because we want to get to the new meeting. There was all kinds of good stuff in today's meeting, which we're going to have a ball talking about. So let's finish this up. Let's see how far this goes.
It will. I think it's going to help all. Yeah. Okay, very much agree. So, Harry, thank you very much.
Harry's in.
So the final, just an update, if I may, before I turn it back to Mr. President, is the trolley trackway protesters issue that you may have seen and read about in the news recently. Over by South Waterfront, there is a protest group by the ICE facility, which Trimet is a part of a consortium of ownerships with the City of Portland, ODOT, Metro, Lake Oswego, and I'm probably forgetting one or so. So the campers have been located on there for a period of time, and I just wanted to advise you that thanks to the good work with Mayor Ted Wheeler and his team, and we've been working with them.
Ted. The good work of Ted Wheeler, who's nothing but a hack.
I mean, this thing should have been snuffed out within the first hour, not 5 weeks later, and almost $30,000 of money spent to clean up.
Yeah, it was $21,000, which is nothing. It's nothing to these bureaucrats.
That did not include in that price tag the money the City of Portland spent on servicing and supplying porta potties, etc.
Yeah, well, I don't know, man. I have sympathy for the ICE protesters. I mean, I know that doesn't do anything.
Let me put it this way. I belong to the association that they were on that track.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. You have.
In that 5 weeks, we lost revenue because we couldn't get down there. We lost revenue of charters that we had hooked up.
That was on that trolley. That was on that track. Oh.
Not only that, the head of our society initially went down there on day one to see what was going on because we were about ready to run. And as he approached the encampment, he was stopped by a young man who said, "Halt, stop, you're trespassing." And Dave, who's head of our society, said, "Who are you?" "Well, I am head of the Society of Safety and Security down here. And you're trespassing, sir." And Dave introduced and says, "Well, I'm head of the Trolley Society, and if anyone's trespassing, you are." And I said, "You're on our tracks. You're in our shelter. By the way, they busted open the lock and the chain securing our porta potty. And by the way, the society didn't bother to the porta potty company that we had rented for said, well, do you want us to go down there and service it?" And we just left it the way it was. So after 5 weeks of overflowing and smelling in the sun, they finally came and gave us a new one.
Yeah. Well, the protest didn't accomplish anything. That much I do know.
By the way, those same protesters, some of them arrived today at City Hall, and there was a big protest down there, and the City Council was disrupted.
Yeah, I'm very connected to a lot of the people that do that disrupting, and I appreciate them because they're fighting these government forces that have no interest in listening to the public at all. I mean, they're fighting an immovable object, and I have a lot of respect for those people that are trying. They're not succeeding, but at least they're making an attempt.
I'm not sure that that's the most effective way to make your point well known.
There is no way to make your point. There is no way to budge the people like him. Okay, there is no way to impact these technocracies. We are locked out of these technocracies. Okay, they do what they want, and they don't care what the rest of us want. So what do you?
That I agree. I mean, we're still open for quote public comment on the southwest quarter.
Yeah, but that's a facade, though. That's not a real.
Right. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a facade. So I mean, a lot of these nonviolent civil disobedience is really the only way to get any kind of notice here. You can't play by their rules. You know that, right? You can't play by the rules established by these people. These people, they've established the rules to protect themselves. Okay, so you have to figure out some other way. I have not figured out how to impact these technocracies, and the people I know have done a much better job disrupting them than I have. But that's not the point. Let's keep moving here. We'll get bogged down in this.
Yeah.
Those protesters have been removed, been given notice about a day or so ago by the city of Portland. The police have moved in, they have vacated, and we're now in the process of large cleanup. So I just wanted to apprise you of that, particularly as it relates to Trimet as one of the owners of this group on the property behind the ice property. So this will help the trolley, the Willamette Trolley Parkway, as they get back in service, which they typically run on the weekends. So
okay.
They should be back up running full bore this Friday. Thank you. That was my report.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for General Manager? All right, then let's move on to the third item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda.
Yeah, we don't need
and for anybody in the audience or anybody watching,
we don't care about this. We don't need the consent agenda.
I couldn't understand what he said anyway.
This is where they're handing out the pork. Okay, we don't care about the pork, do we?
We all know that this is going to get approved.
Yeah, all this pork is going to be handed out. If you want to read about the pork, you can go over to my blog, the Rantings blog, and I have a post devoted to the pork, linking to the Trimet documents where they explain the pork. But we don't care about it. I think, let me just see. Oh, wait, now who's this guy coming up here? Oh, okay. Yeah, he's going to...
Firms for Opportunities.
This is the capital projects
really
guy.
Important. Your recommendation is...
When we knew that we had enough money to bring that scope...
Who justifies the pork.
Yeah, right.
Back in, we put that out for a CMGC contract, and Raymore was the successful bidder.
Yeah, okay, we don't care about any of this, so maybe we can just move to the next. Do you care about any of this? This is just a... Wait a minute.
And not one of these board members understand what they're approving.
And we can grow into the changes over time in multiple phases.
Right.
We have, I'd like to call up Carl Green as well, if I believe he is here.
Now, who is this?
And we do have some results from the Title VI.
The Title VI.
Well.
You know anything about Title VI? Title VI is this bureaucratic crap that the feds supposedly force all the transit agencies to do a so-called equity analysis. It's the biggest bunch of garbage going as far as I'm concerned. It's just another level of bureaucracy and justifying paying somebody to do some kind of study that has no actual value.
Yeah, is this the one that we're paying two people to come into town to evaluate ours?
I don't know. I think it might be. Let's see. I don't know whether they're in-house. Let's see who. It's garbage, though.
Mr. Board President, fellow directors of the board, thank you all for having me here today. Just a quick administrative note as far as Title VI goes. For those in the room that are not familiar with the terminology, this refers to the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. By way of this important legislation and...
Oh, by the way things are going, I'm sure this act will be thrown out along with all the other protections. I mean, that's the way things... This act should be thrown out because it really doesn't... This doesn't accomplish anything. This is some kind of window dressing thing.
The Federal Transit Administration, Trimet as a transit agency receives federal funding, so there are three types of analysis that needs to be performed to be in compliance with the Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA. One is for any major service change. The second is any fare changes. And the third, which I'm here to speak for you today, is facility sightings.
Yeah, we're not going to watch this. Okay, this is not. Are you interested in this?
Do you think he just Yeah, no.
What he's going to come up with, what he's going to say is, they're going to they're going to build, they're building all this shit, Trimet is rolling in dough, in case people don't know. They're going to be building all of these facilities around Portland and other places, and so they've evaluated it for impact on minority communities, and it has no impact on minority communities, according to them. Okay, so I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. They're going to build it, and they've done this extra study,
Or
doesn't
a facility
mean
siting?
anything.
Let me digress. Is there a reason why when you pop up your screen, everything is in reverse?
Mine?
Yeah.
It's in reverse. I don't know. It looks fine.
All the
looks fine. to me.
title, all the verbiage is it's like if you're reading Hebrew.
if you will, to meet the agency's needs. So part of it is not just what the
Yeah.
property was used for today by Caterpillar, but it's also
Yeah. See, this is all capital projects crap, and
Yeah.
they're going to approve it, and it's not interesting. It's pork barrel.
You could take testimony from 10 years ago.
Right.
Change.
Yeah, right. It's all the same crap over and
It's
over.
also, by the time this gets deployed,
There's. Wait a minute. Here's Dee Brookshire. She can be interesting.
And then there isn't a dollar amount, but so is the dollar amount the 5.6
Yeah, they're giving away
Millions?
millions and hundreds of
in
millions.
that budget? And then I have an 18-19 budget right here, so I'm just trying to make sure things
That
match up
budget
so
she's holding.
that.
You see that thing?
And maybe
Look
our
at the size of that.
expert finance person can. I see you're getting up.
You can't. Nobody can understand this. They do this in a way that nobody can figure out what they're doing, and I'm sure it's intentional.
I'm just trying to mirror what is in our budget that we adopted to what is being talked about here.
Way to go, Director.
Let's see. Oh, way to go! Did you hear what he just said there?
So we have an amount in our budget
Whoa, that was
for the
disrespectful.
overall fourth bus base that includes this contract plus a general estimation of what we believe the project will cost us in fiscal year 19. I think the number is 34 million.
34 million here, 34 million there. Who
37
cares,
million.
right?
Okay.
You'll see that if you look at the list of projects, you'll see
Oh, yes.
fourth bus base.
Okay. I see. So I'm on CP. Well, this is a large book. So
She's trying.
so where are the capital?
She's trying to make sense out of this. Good luck.
Yeah, by the way, the woman testifying, if you've ever watched her, she's head of...
She's the head of
finance.
she's a finance woman.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to her in the... there's another meeting that once in a while I watch, the tax meeting, where she... And she bamboozles these people on the other end who supposedly know what she's talking about. And time she gets done, they say, "Thank you very much," and they finally realize she didn't answer the question.
Yeah, she's very. And I do actually like listening to her because she's one of the more interesting people to listen to on the board there.
The capital projects are mentioned here, but then the fourth bus facility is not in here, and unless there's a specific
There's 4 bus
page
facilities. Huh?
that I
Should be there. I don't have my copy of the budget. I'll be happy
Oh,
to
shit.
show you if you'd like after the meeting.
Yeah, all I see is division summary, capital projects for 1819, capital projects division, and then there's the summary, administration, capital program, maybe
You should have a
And you know how I feel about this, right? I feel the entire capital project department should be disbanded. Trimet should not be expanding service anymore. Trimet should just concentrate on what it's got and stop draining all this money for all these things that don't help transit riders. That's how I feel about this, Trimet should...
But if you stop the capital projects, as I said, Trimet is a capitalization Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why they won't stop it.
The whole thing will collapse.
Well, there'd be dozens and dozens of people that would lose their jobs. I know that. the capital projects division does run Trimet. That is the number one thing that Trimet does. But I mean, there's hundreds of millions of dollars that get diverted from service, actual service, into these capital projects, and that's why service is so marginal. You know, it's not a world-class system. It doesn't run on the weekends. It doesn't run at night. You know.
By the way, Seattle, I was just reading, got the number one ranking in the nation.
Yeah, that's from APTA. APTA's that's a conglomerate of all the. It's like a trade organization for public transportation. I would I don't know if I don't give them much credibility. I'd rather have.
Well, and number one, considering if you're reading and following their problems, which
right,
it is a foreboding if we go ahead with this Southwest Corridor project.
Oh no, the Trimet really has. You know, when you listen to the operation, when you read what's really going on, Trimet has no business expanding. Okay, they're not doing it right. What they got, expanding is the worst thing they could be doing. But they're not. You know, they're not going to do that because, as you say, the capital projects division is in charge here, and you know there's all these people employed there, all these pork contracts that are going out, and pork is the number one government program. That's what government's all about. You know they pretend they're doing things for people, but in reality they're stealing tax money for special interest.
Tab called CIP.
Okay.
That should list
So
all
it's
the
under
projects.
CIP.
So she's trying to make sense out of it, but you can't. You know, it's not possible. Boy, Warner's looking impatient. Look at
No, this is good.
Oh, this is good. Yeah,
Make
watch
sure it's included.
I apologize for getting our budget and
Yeah, so I think it was just, are we staying in line with the budget that the board adopted? It's just my general question, and it sounds like we are, which is great.
We are.
But there's no way to verify.
But I would like maybe you two to get together and
Sure.
Get together, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't ask so many goddamn questions, lady. Get together in private. Don't
So
bite.
other questions by the board?
Well, I just want to respond to Dr. Way. We actually, from the Finance and Audit Committee, we actually take a look in depth at all this information. So if you have any questions in regards to how things roll back to the budget at any given time, and any board member, please don't hesitate to talk to one of us. Director Simmons, President Warner, and myself. I'm the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, and both President Warner and I have been on the Finance Committee, I think, since we joined the board for 6 years.
All right, let's move it.
Yeah, I'll just digress. Is that in the past, very recent past, that it was an outside person, not anyone connected with Trimet, but who actually went through a budget years ago and said, what the hell does this line mean? And it turned out this is where they buried all the raises for the top 100 people.
Right. Yeah, they're very dishonest. We know this.
And when caught, McFarland said, oh my God, I'm shocked.
Oh, I remember that from 2012, right.
I'm shocked. We will make sure this never happens again.
Right.
In his same tenure, once again, raises were approved and buried in this capitalization budget.
Yeah. No, as far as I'm concerned, these government officials are basically a criminal society. I mean, I might be a little harsh to say, but I do believe that. I do believe that they're in it for special interest and themselves, and the public be damned. Not just Trimet, but all government function at this point has been hijacked by the elites.
And I not only were the raises approved, but the board of directors approved it.
Right.
Condoned it.
Yeah, well, they don't.
They went along with it.
Yeah, they stood by it.
And no one, even from the governor on down, said, or Metro, which is part of this supposed to be part of the oversight, no one said boo.
No, Neal, if you remember, that's where the Secretary of State was supposed to do this audit. You remember that?
Yes.
It was because of the raises, and it was Kate Brown, by the way. And when they did the audit, when it finally came out 1 year later, because they try to put these things out as long as possible so the public forgets about it, they didn't even address the raises in the audit. It wasn't in there anywhere. I remember this clearly. I was following it closely, and the audit finally came out, and they didn't even talk about the raises. What they talked about was employee benefits. Okay,
right. so and it digressed nothing more than the company line.
You're exactly.
Right. And by the way, now Kate's governor, and I'm still waiting for her recommendation via her when she was Secretary of State that there should have been a follow-up audit, and that has never taken place.
No, that was all a bullshit smokescreen. These people all are part of the same cabal of thieves, and that's why nothing was addressed. Nothing will be. This is a I know it sounds harsh, but it is a criminal operation in the sense that nobody gets to say in how they spend this money. They've decided what they're going to do, and that money is funneled from the taxpayers into the pockets of the special interest without any input from the public. Let's see. They're going to have a board briefing here. Where is it? The board briefing, I think there might have been something interesting in the board briefing. Let's just see. Okay, where is it? There it is, right there.
Are on the critical timelines that are literally unfolding as we speak. So the details of the visuality of the tour and the trade-offs that come with large capital projects like that is slightly separate than what you're going to see in the slides here as well. So Bernie, to the first one on HB 17.
Okay.
Good afternoon, President Warner, members of the board.
So they're going to talk. Are you familiar with HB 217 or 27? This was that $4 billion tax grab that the criminals that call themselves legislatures at the State House decide it comes out to $1,400 per Oregon resident stolen by the legislature and handed out to a committee of unelected technocrats. Just like they formed this committee, it's very similar to Trimet. It reports to the governor. It's a technocracy. And, they have all the same disguise. They're going to have all these committees and but so far, it's I haven't seen anything published about it. They don't tape their meetings, for example, when they're having public testimony. They don't put them up on the internet like this. And as you know, Trimet does not advertise the fact that they're having these meetings. They don't put it on their Facebook. They don't put it on Twitter. Nobody discloses these Trimet board meetings are going on.
And I want to tell you, the union ATU 757 does a very poor job of exposing, and did an extremely poor job of trying to stop this legislation from going through.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. The union spent money sending out a questionnaire. What do you think about it? And time they tabulated it and thought about what doing, it was passed.
Yeah.
And I must admit, that was Mr. Jared leading that inept defense.
Really? Well, I don't think they were against it anyway, were they?
Yes, they were.
Were they against it? There was no real coverage. There was no real media coverage against this.
There was no real coverage. There was an opportunity for the union to go do something about it. I actually called up and talked to Jared.
Oh.
And said, it's now time to start hitting hard. He said, well, if you hit hard, these are people we'll need in the future. And I'm just going,
oh boy.
That's the frame of mind of, I said, playing nice is going to get you knocked out.
Yeah, no, you can't play. You really can't play nice with. But they're part of the institute. Unfortunately, they're part of the institutional structure too, They're institutionalized. The union is institutionalized, which means it doesn't really have any incentive to try to change anything. And all the union executive officers are making six-figure income. Okay, so what's the incentive for them to want to fight Trimet? They don't have any. And that's one of the problems with the unions, is they became institutionalized. And now that members don't have to pay dues anymore, this might change. You might actually find unions that fight a little harder. Okay, because
they're going to have to go out and justify why they want that money.
Exactly.
From quote the membership.
Exactly.
In process, and I'm going to go quickly over some of these slides so that we have
this
time
guy
for
is very
questions.
good with statistics.
Well, he's a consummate insider. He's an insider. He's been in the state level. He's been all over. He's a real insider.
We don't get too far behind. Just a quick reminder, this is legislation that passed in 2017. 0.1% tax on payroll of individuals. 90% of those funds come back to the Portland region. 10% go to ODOT, and we can compete for a portion of those funds, but for all intents and purposes, the most important aspect is the 90% that flows back to the region. Tax went into effect July 1. In the first fiscal year, we get a half fiscal year's worth of funding, about $22 million, and then as the program ramps up, we anticipate something in the neighborhood of $51 million regionally. Trimet's share of that will be somewhat smaller because, as you'll see, we're a broker for the rest of the region.
They're the broker for the rest of the yeah. So it all goes
right. By the way, what you're showing, I'm seeing, is all backwards. It's like,
really? You can't read that?
If I got a mirror, I might be able to.
I don't know why. Has that been that way before? Is this the first time this happened?
Yes, it's been that way before.
It must. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
You must have bought the camera from Israel.
I don't know, man. I'm sorry. Anyway, they're telling you here what they can use it. It's increased frequency and expansion of bus routes, service to high concentrations of low-income residents. Yeah.
What he's trying to politely say, and he didn't spell it out explicitly, is that 90% of the money is going into Trimet's pocket.
Right, it's going into their pocket.
And the other 10%, although we don't get it, we can still try to get pieces of it if we want.
Yeah, we control it. They control it, basically.
Right. And so, as I've said before, the people who are getting these low-income fares or reduced fares, the Trimet gives you the reduced fare, and meanwhile, even though you're at minimum wage, we're taking a percentage of that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. You're paying the tax. Well, we'll give you a little bit.
So, just thank God that we're here to give you this.
Yeah.
There are a few requirements.
And the low-income fare never would have been anything if they, it was their little sop to the masses out of the tax grab. That's what it was.
In the legislation, the services that are provided with the new funding have to increase the frequency and coverage of service to areas with a high concentration of low-income households. And
well, that's not Portland. All the low-income households are outside of Portland now. Portland has pushed all the low-income people out.
Rule requires that definition of low-income households is 200% of the federal poverty level or below. High concentrations is an issue that's left up to each area to decide, and I'll talk about that in a minute, how we've addressed that issue. It doesn't require, but it encourages us to look at natural gas electric buses. It allows use for low-income fare, and it requires that we look at improving connections and coordination inside and outside of the Trimet district. Sets aside 1% of the funds for a student transportation program directed at youth between 9th and 12th grade, but doesn't give more definition than that.
No funds for light rail.
Funds can be used for new light rail construction.
I always found that funny that they made sure that was, you could not use it for light rail. I found that interesting, to say the least, that they excluded light rail from this completely.
And I don't understand that, but all I can see is, if that is the case, to me, it must mean, and I'm not a financial, I do not understand the budget. Does that mean that it frees up other money to be directed towards light rail?
Well, that's what we won't know until we see how much they get and where it goes. If we can track it, we really can't track the money that Trimet gets now, and so we don't know if we're going to be able to track this money either. I mean, it's very, you look at that Trimet budget, it's very hard to know what went where and how. Okay, and I'm sure they're going to do just as.
Yeah, well, there's one thing that's I did notice when she held up the budget, that thick book. Okay. Just stop and think. It is actually thicker than the current Yellow Pages.
Oh yeah, yeah. No.
Remember when the Yellow Pages used to come in 2 or 3 volumes? Now it's not even big enough or thick enough to act as a booster chair for a young child. But the Trimet budget is taking that place.
That's right. Oh yeah.
So, as I mentioned, Trimet is the regional recipient of these funds. So we act as a broker for the Tri-County area. So Trimet will receive and is responsible for developing a plan for the expenditure of about $51 million a year in fiscal year 2020. And these figures are 115% of the current ODOT revenue estimate. We're allowed to submit a plan that it goes up to more than the revenue estimate in case we get more funds. We tend to think that we will get more than the revenue estimate because the revenue estimate assumes a 75% compliance rate, and we already have an existing payroll tax in this region. It's very similar, so we expect a higher compliance rate. Trimet receives $46 million about of those funds, and those go into Trimet services and capital. About $5 million goes to Trimet, non-Trimet providers. That includes SMART and Sandy, Canby, and South Clackamas Transportation District. It includes the rural areas of Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah County that don't have a service provider. And the committee has recommended, the advisory committee has recommended an allocation of $3 million to shuttle services that are provided inside the Trimet geographic area, but are not Trimet services, such as the Hillsborough shuttle and Tualatin Forest Grove shuttles. Yeah.
Bernie, do we get an administrative fee for coordinating the distribution?
Of course
we do.
Yeah, of course you
We haven't determined that yet, but the legislation allows
they get an administrative fee for distributing the funds. Yeah, so they all.
When he used the term, when he used the term broker,
right?
Brokers don't work for nothing.
Yeah, they'll take 10%. That's usually what they take. So out of the $46 million, they'll take $4.6 million, hire a bunch of executives. You know what they do with that money.
Right. My final question to Bernie is, so how much new support staff and managers are we going to have?
Yeah, a lot. Okay, that's Trimet just keeps hiring bureaucrats. They can't get drivers, but they sure have no problem finding bureaucrats, that's for sure.
So as I mentioned, we're responsible for developing a plan that is submitted to the state to outline how these funds would be spent. And so we will actually we are working with all of the other transit providers and the counties in the region to develop those plans and then consolidate them into one regional application. That goes to the STIF committee, which is the House Bill 2017 Citizen Advisory Committee that we've talked about before. Their recommendation comes to the Trimet board. We're doing a consultation process.
Their recommendation. So in other words, they don't
their
get
consultation.
Yeah, they don't
which means you got 3 minutes each one of you.
Right. It's another window dressing board. I could almost guarantee it.
with the JPACT and with Region 1 Act. It's not required in the legislation, but we felt that it was important that we coordinate with those two policy bodies. And then ultimately to the Oregon Transportation Commission, and they have the ultimate authority to approve or disapprove of the plan. The advisory committee, the Trimet board can modify the advisory committee's recommendation.
Yeah, the board can.
And remember, the board in this case is sitting.
The board can or cannot listen to what the committee has to say. See, this is kind of upside down here, you know.
In a slightly different role than you typically do. You're both reviewing the Trimet plan, but you're also reviewing the plans for non-Trimet services, Sandy, Canby, Malala, etc. So you'll have to sort of put a different hat on when that comes to you. You can modify the recommendations of the advisory committee. If you do that, there's a report that's required to be developed that indicates why you made those changes.
Oh, that's interesting. So at least they make them explain it.
As I mentioned, the advisory committee has been up and running for almost a year now.
Who are they?
It is Trimet-wide. It's actually Tri-County-wide. Includes representatives from all the areas inside the Tri-County region, and then has a wide variety of backgrounds and interests, seniors, students.
See, those advisory committees should be broadcast like this meeting. We should be able to see that, and they're not doing that. They're not making these meetings, advisory committee meetings, available.
We've got a number of rider advocates, communities of color, the environmental community, labor unions, and other modes, including streetcar and Lyft. Ride Connection are represented on that committee. The decisions that the committee has made so far, two of these you've already acted on. One is the low-income fare. That was an important commitment that we made to the legislature during the debate about House Bill 2017, that we would use funds from this to implement a low-income fare program. John Gardner and his group, working with Sam Chase, a Metro councilor, developed a proposal which was to have a 50% discount for individuals at 200% of the federal poverty or below, and that is expected to ultimately cost something in the neighborhood of $12 million a year. It won't start there, but our expectation is that it may ramp up to that level. In order to put additional service out on the street quickly and sort of around the same time frame as the tax goes into effect, to show the community that they're getting benefit from the tax, we asked the committee and you to pre-approve the use of these funds for the fiscal year 19 service improvements. So those improvements will go out in September of this year and March of next year. If we hadn't done that, it would have been almost a year and a half after the tax went into effect when we would be adding service from the tax. And we felt that was really not keeping faith with the taxpayers. The committee has recommended allocating $3 million.
They want to keep faith with the taxpayers when they didn't give the taxpayers a chance to vote on this. So I mean, that's just they just shoved this down the taxpayers' throats. So I mean, that's just a blatant lie. There's no faith to the taxpayers in this at all.
To the non-Trimet shuttle services, such as North Hillsborough, Tualatin, Forest Grove, and Swan Island. They have recommended an allocation of $2.2 million to the areas outside of the Trimet district. That's based on a calculation of 90% of the funds being generated in those areas. So it's not a perfect analysis because the data is not perfect, but it's based on our GIS systems and the state Department of Labor report. And then, of course, the 1% for student transportation would be something in the neighborhood of $500,000 a year. So as we developed the scenarios around how the service would be allocated, we had to address this issue of what is a high concentration of low income that the legislation calls for. And there was a lot of debate and discussion at the advisory committee about how to do that. And we ultimately decided to use Trimet's existing 10-factor equity index, which Carl has talked to you about using in our Title VI analysis in the past. It's a blended set of criteria and measures that we use that incorporate the concentrations of people of color, limited English proficiency, youth populations, senior populations, disabled populations, and those all get aggregated into an index. And when you apply that,
so what he's essentially saying is they took the recommendations, and then he applied their formula, Trimet's formula, and that was the answer.
Yeah, right.
And again, we don't know because there is no record or video or recording of what went on in that meeting.
Right. Right.
So just take his word for it.
Exactly.
and analyze it.
My question is, when you get done and see how much money and time and effort that has been put into this, you might as well just give these people who need the fare the free fare anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
I'm sure not only will you break even, but you will be ahead. Unfortunately, you will not have as many people in management administering unnecessary program.
Exactly.
The top 25% of census blocks that have those factors, you get a map that looks like this. You can see East Portland, Cornelius, and Hillsborough, areas of Clackamas County. So this is now the base map for our discussions with the committee. These are the sort of origins of trips that we will try to serve as we build the service scenarios around the House Bill 2017 proposal. But this is only one end of the trip. It's sort of where it starts. Where do people live? The other question is, where do they want to go? And so what we've done is through our GIS mapping system, drawn lines around those areas of low-income housing and looked at where are the destinations that people want to go to from those locations. Work centers, churches, hospitals, social service, school, and so forth. So we now have the two ends of trips, where people start, where they want to go, and we're building a network of new routes, expanded routes, and improved routes that will serve those areas. And we'll be presenting that to the committee in the next couple of days.
Next couple of days? Oh.
We did extensive public outreach to get feedback on what kinds of services people wanted to see and the balance between services and capital. You heard about electric buses, folks that want to expand service hours, low-income fare, student fare, and those kinds of things. We did a lot of work with the community to identify how folks wanted to balance those competing interests. We did something new for us, which was contracting with ERCO. And they did a tremendous job of partnering with other community-based organizations that served populations within the community that we wanted to access. Centro Cultural, POIC, which is a workforce development program, SEI, and you see the others there. We also did an online survey process that generated about 5,400 pieces of feedback, and the general manager went through his series of town hall meetings, and we also gathered information from those about how people wanted to see the funds allocated. In order to frame the public discussion in a way that we could use, we put together sort of categories of things that we could spend the money on: service increases, additional fare discounts, reliability through things like transit priority treatments, and then capital improvements such as electric bus and ADA accessibility, and then finally security. And through the online and workshop work that we did, these were the major priorities that were identified. Expanding service coverage and more frequent service were the most often mentioned improvements that people would like to see, as well as on-street amenities. It was interesting, the workshops typically when Trimet staff gets the opportunity to spend more money, we like to really emphasize service hours. That's the sharp end of the spear. We're really getting the service out into the community. We tend to try to do 70%, 65% of any new resource on service. It was interesting, the workshops, it was more 50-50, and a lot of that was people who currently have service that want to see amenities like shelters and better station areas and things like that. So it was a good eye-opener for us and a reality check with the community. But other things did show up there: weekend and evening services, electric bus, digital displays. Those were all things that showed up in the workshops or online. Two things that we didn't test in those meetings, in those venues, because they kind of came to the committee later, were a request from the City of Portland to fund streetcar, and a request from Ride Connection and the coalition that they work with to fund additional Ride Connection services for seniors and people with disabilities. So what we'll be showing the advisory committee later this week.
What? This?
That request by the City of Portland.
Yeah, that's bullshit. To fund,
the streetcar has been a financial disaster from the get-go.
Well, they say it's a great success, Neal.
Well, yes, that has been due to the very successful man who led it for 12 years, Rick Gustafson, who promoted the myth that spread across this country of the streetcar success, which has not, where other cities have tried it and realized, my God, what pill did we swallow?
Right. It worked in Portland, and
I think it was in Georgia, Atlanta, and a couple other cities that it's turned out to be the same thing that's happening here, is that the thing moves at a snail's pace. The cars are breaking down because they're old. The ones that they bought that were subsidized by the taxpayers and the federal government to be manufactured here were pieces of junk. And that business is no longer here, and it's been disconnecting stops to try to collect up 90%, no revenue connected. The only thing I ever agreed with Commissioner Novak, who was on the city council, who said, if I had the power to stop streetcar completely, I would do it.
Yeah, it's a neoliberal property development tool, you know.
I mean, it was and it is nothing more via Mayor Katz's tutelage as a promotional tool for developers in the Pearl District.
Yeah, and it worked for that. I mean, I was living there when they put that in, and I remember when I was living right over there when that went in. And I remember all the high-priced condos. That was part of their ad, was free streetcar outside of the door to get people to buy those condos, and it worked. You know,
and it worked.
Yeah,
and now
I mean, for the developers, you know, I'll just get a free.
Yeah, it was for the developers. The developers are no longer. They have never kicked in.
No. That's your neoliberal. You know, you take the tax money and you use it for the benefit of a neoliberal elites, and that's what the streetcar is. It's got the transit riders have no. It's not a transit tool. It gets stuck behind broken down cars. It's in the middle of the street. There's no advantage over a bus other than it's cuter. You know, it's not a transit tool.
I mean, the extension of the streetcar on the south side, it's been called the ghost train.
Yeah, right. I mean,
because if you look on it, there is hardly anyone ever riding it.
Right. And the reason why the west side has so many riders is because of PSU, really. I mean, every PSU student gets a free streetcar pass. You know that, right? And so, and a lot of the people that ride it over there are students at PSU and live in Northwest, you know.
I think they have hired 2 or 3 years ago, quote, one fare inspector.
Do you get a ticket on there? They actually give you some kind of fare?
By the way, the Trimet ATU protested that fare inspector was not part of the union, but separate. And by the way, it took him one year of training of how to write a ticket, and he didn't write a ticket in that year. Yeah. So, I mean, the chief of fare inspectors at the time, Gary Rafford, was just amazed because Trimet fare inspectors were not allowed by code, and it could have been amended by code by either the city council and the board of directors, that they would go over and start writing tickets. By the way, the revenue, if I recall, last time I heard it, the total revenue that the streetcar collects in a year is under $500,000.
Really?
In fares.
Really, that low?
Oh yeah, it's and if you want great reading, and it was one of the reasons Mr. Gustafson said after 12 years, it is time for me to pursue other things, which he has. He's been involved with promoting the LA streetcar, and he also heads up a non-profit organization with the title, which is long and lengthy, that you would think it just is concerned for transit riders, but it is a front for developers to promote a streetcar or a MAX system to Lake Oswego. And the reason he left, there was a city auditor's report, which is great reading, which indicts not only the city of Portland for lack of oversight of the streetcar, but money spent via the federal government, funds that came in by the federal government, that no one oversaw how it was spent on these new streetcars. It was a pork barrel, no end.
Yeah.
And now that the money has run out, it's everyone is looking for revenue.
Jeez. God.